So this is game number 4 of Serral against AlphaStar. This time, AlphaStar is playing as Terran. We're on a new map as well. Of course, Serral staying over here as Zerg. So let's take a look and see what AlphaStar's Terran looks like in comparison to its Protoss. So AlphaStar going ahead and setting up a wall-in at the choke. This is at the ramp, rather. This is a very common tactic from Terran. It's been around for more than 20 years now. Terran is a little bit weak in the earlier phases of the game, so you utilize buildings to block off any entrances where your opponent might attack you. Terran has nifty things like being able to put its supply depots underground at will, so you can walk over them, or lift off buildings and make them fly so you can walk under them. So this type of walling off behavior works very, very well as Terran. Now, this is a normal build order that we're seeing from AlphaStar. A Reaper being created, also expanding, just very standard. Now, the Reaper is going to leave immediately to go scout Serral, which isn't really odd in any way, but there is a way that this can be punished, and that's by running Zerglings around the Reaper's scout path. The Overlord of Serral is flying in, it sees which way the Reaper is going. In the meantime, Serral has 4 Zerglings that are being made and being sent out. So you can see that Serral will simply dodge the area where the Reaper is likely to come and go around for a little bit of an attack. The Reaper coming in right now sees, okay, a hatchery being made. Nothing too weird. There's a queen. Nothing weird. Checks around the back of the mineral line. It doesn't see anything weird here. It's really looking for a roach warren. To see if there's going to be an early attack. But it scouts everything pretty normally. Whereas these Zerglings have run around it. Now, it's very normal for Terran to build just the Reaper or a Reaper and a Marine, something like this. And then start to make add-ons with its building instead of building units. For instance, this reactor that is being built by the barracks, so that the barracks cannot build any other units right now, will allow the barracks to build more units in the future. So, Serral has done a great job already punishing AlphaStar. It kills off the SCV that's constructing the command center, so the command center is going to be stuck at 397 of 1500 health, and of course it can't do anything until it's finished. And this fighting force is not enough to take on this fighting force. So, the 4 Zerglings will reign supreme for now until AlphaStar can either bring the Reaper back home or make some more units. Of course, that wall can just go up that we talked about before. The Zerglings cannot get in there. So the wall doing its job, but AlphaStar being a little bit punished here. You see AlphaStar having a little bit of a hard time. Of course, as these 2 Marines pop out, it will be fine. Now, this is quite interesting. The Reaper is actually still over here. It's still getting some scouting intel, and there's only 4 Zerglings in the natural. Yet AlphaStar starts a bunker. A bunker is a very defensive structure for Terran. If, for instance, Serral was doing some sort of all-in attack that just must do damage, or Serral would be too far behind to really win the game, then yes, let's build some bunkers. In this situation, against just 4 Zerglings, the bunker is more than meaningless. And the positioning even of the bunker is very bizarre, because it's not protecting really much of the wall, and it will kind of protect this supply depot, but it won't protect this one at all, and it won't really protect even the barracks. So the positioning is strange, and the fact that it is making it is strange as well. AlphaStar also going for a very fast 3rd command center and actually getting a tech lab on its factory. Let's take a look at how this turns out. The Reaper is still over here, trying to harass a little bit. Serral's taking a 3rd base. This is some very normal Terran versus Zerg scuffling that's going on. The Reaper tries to slow down the 3rd base. The Zerg tries to take the 3rd base as quickly as he can. So the 3 Marines easily push out those Zerglings as expected. The bunker still being made. The bunker does have an interesting function where it's the only building in the game that you can sell back, but you only get 75% of its value returned. and a siege tank being made. So these are some other interesting things. See, the AlphaStar sold that bunker, it got salvaged. The siege tank, this is really interesting as well. I'm sorry I keep saying interesting, but it really is, because some of the choices that AlphaStar is making are just so different. So AlphaStar is just producing Marines off of this reactor barracks, and is now producing siege tanks while going for a third command center. The thing is, the Reaper scouted a lot and knows that there's no attack incoming. Now, if there was an attack incoming, the siege tanks make a lot of sense. They're a very defensive unit. They sit in siege mode, they hit very far away, they do area of effect damage. Any rushes that would come, the siege tank would just smash. But normally what we see in this matchup would be a lot of Hellions being produced out of this. And Hellions are very fast Terran units that are strong in the early game. They're a very good counter to the Zerglings. And what that does is it gives the Terrans some pressure against the Zerg and some map control. And both of those are very important. I've talked about it previously, how pressure is important against Zerg because you want them to spend their larva not on making drones, but on making units. Here, you can see 26 SCVs against 34 drones. Serral's already really vastly ahead in that, and there's no real pressure on Serral once he sees that siege tanks are being produced to make anything but drones. So Serral is really going to get any type of economy that he wants to get in this game. He's also going to have map control because there aren't going to be any units that can really fight against Zerglings early on. So AlphaStar is taking an incredibly defensive stance. Basically, the way that AlphaStar is playing, nothing can really kill it, but it can't do anything to dictate how Serral plays right now. Normally, a pro gamer will choose more of a middle ground approach than something like that. So AlphaStar adding additional barracks, it's really focusing on getting lots of units out. A lot of times, professional Terran players will actually throw up a starport next and continue that tech advancement, get some flying units out so that it can do some harassment. But instead, AlphaStar just seems to want to build up its unit count. This is a somewhat normal technique, not to lift it up and then fly it back. It seems as if AlphaStar is changing its mind quite often, but sometimes you'll stop using a building for a little bit, land it, build another add-on, switch buildings with different add-ons to make units at different timings. Pretty common stuff. But AlphaStar right now just sitting very defensively, making a very solid Marine count, and getting ready to fly over and take its third base. So let's take a look at the actual economies right now. 40 SCVs against 51 drones. It's not bad for AlphaStar. It does have a very fast third command center, but it can't keep any sort of pressure, again, on Serral. Nothing that would be too scary. AlphaStar building a secondary wall here. Again, a very common tactic. It'll want to build many walls throughout the game to just slow down any counterattacks. Leaving a tank in siege mode here. That's a good defensive measure. Setting up another tank in siege mode here. Another good defensive measure. You can see this is the range of the siege tank attack. Those little triangles that you see. So very good. It'll hit anything coming in. Now here is the very, very, very strange part of this game. That is a large group of Marines moving out. Okay, that's 16 Marines. And this is a strange move out timing. Not sure what AlphaStar is exactly trying to do. My guess is it has something to do with what I was mentioning before, where AlphaStar actually has no way to dictate what Serral's doing in this game. So Serral's already at 62 drones. Okay, that is only 4 drones off of perfect saturation for 3 bases. That's quite quick. Serral actually has very few units right now. 3 roaches that have popped out just recently, and 8 Zerglings with speed, along with 5 queens on the map, which are more of a macro unit, but can be used for defense. So Serral has kind of gotten to do everything he wanted so far this game. But this move out, I was actually sitting next to Serral during this game watching him play, and I was quite perplexed as to what I was seeing here. Now let's look at what these Marines do. So they're just kind of poking out at the moment. They picked off a couple Zerglings. They're walking over here. The Zerglings come up. See, Serral's trying to check out what's going on. That's why we see the Zerglings running. It's not as if Serral thinks these Zerglings can do anything against the Marines. He's actually checking what's here, because it's very odd to see Marines just walking around the map at this time. It would be much more common for these Marines, for instance, to suddenly appear over here because they flew there in a medevac. Instead, the Marines walking around, and a larger amount of Marines than you would normally see with the 3rd Command Center being made this quickly. Serral is a little bit confused right now. So Serral's actually making quite a few extra roaches. The roaches are a very defensive measure against these Marines. So in its own way, whether AlphaStar meant to or not, it's forced Serral to make a lot of units that Serral does not actually want right now. And you can see that the SCV count is catching up to those drones. So now 15 roaches are out, which is actually more than you need to deal with this by far. And look at that, 3 more roaches on the way. So between the queens, the few lings that Serral has, and the amount of roaches that are being made, it's a big counter to what AlphaStar is doing. And you'll see in a moment that these Marines don't really get anything done. The roach count can very, very easily take them out. Serral even making a Ravager there with an injured roach. So Serral didn't really lose anything to those Marines. He just killed them very one-sidedly. I actually talked to Serral about that Marine move out after the game, and he said that the reason that he made these roaches is because he thought there was a medevac with them. And a medevac, which is this unit that's being built right now out of the starport, is something that would heal the Marines and make them a lot sturdier against the roaches, and helps them to utilize this upgrade that's being made right now, Stimpack, which makes them shoot faster and move faster. So in that type of situation, if there were a couple medevacs with those Marines, then yeah, you might need this many roaches to really force them back. You know, they'd be lifted up into the medevacs and dropped here, so you might have to split your roaches. So yeah, it's kind of a very weird move that we saw out of AlphaStar, but it had an effect that, even though losing those Marines is not fantastic, it's probably good in a way to make Serral make some units right now, rather than let Serral do whatever he wants. So looking back at AlphaStar's base, AlphaStar has continued making siege tanks somewhat regularly. AlphaStar is upgrading, making a lot of Marines here as well. Playing a very, very defensive game. Serral's coming in to kind of check out what's going on. You see these kind of weirdly placed depots. Those can be helpful against counterattacks. They aren't generally as good as just a straight-up wall, but we've seen previously that AlphaStar is not the best at walling. It seems to get the general idea, but lacks the perfect execution that we see from pro gamers. Finally, AlphaStar is flying around with some of these medevacs, trying to do some harassment. Here's another one right there. Just dropping out these Marines. Looking at what... Let's take a look at the worker counts. So we have 80 drones against 73 SCVs right now. It's mostly a Roach Ravager army. A lot of Zerglings being added in. Baneling speed is on the way, so certainly Banelings will join. A lot of siege tanks and now medevacs being made for AlphaStar. So not completely uncommon unit compositions here. You definitely see Marine medevac siege tank. It's a good composition overall. So you see AlphaStar starting to go to multiple locations here. Again, the Roach is coming up to fight. The Marines have 2 medevacs and stim, so that's something Serral will want to run away from. See, this is kind of what he was expecting on that first Marine move out. It's come now, though. And now Serral trying to just fend off the harassment techniques here of AlphaStar. I do want to point out that AlphaStar is very on top of expanding. Another command center on the way already. The macro, also quite strong. 176 supply against 185. And actually, the supply of AlphaStar is pretty strong in comparison to what Serral is making here. Roaches are supply expensive for their strength, I guess is a good way to put it. So we'll speed that up just a little bit. I want to point out how strong Serral's vision is here. We're going to switch to Serral's vision just for a moment. So you can notice if you look at the mini-map in the bottom left, this is just a small map that shows basically everything that's going on in the game. We're on Serral's vision, so you can see what he can see. So let's look. He's got a changeling in here. It's a fake marine that he's dropped off that AlphaStar has not noticed, that sees the unit count for the most part, sees that there's 4 bases, a lot of siege tanks, a lot of marines. An overseer here, an overlord here, a zergling here, an overlord here, a zergling here, a zergling here, and then of course all of the creep tumors everywhere giving vision, and on the edges of the map, lots of overlords. So Serral sees more than half the map right now. And what he's trying to do is prevent any damage from coming in. Because that is kind of how Terran likes to play. Not just AlphaStar, but any Terran wants to try to get in with things like Medivacs and deal a lot of damage to the economy and then follow it up with a strong push. Now we know that AlphaStar has a strong push that will be coming at some point, but can it get damage done with its harassment units? We'll see. So AlphaStar trying to get a drop off. Good defensive spore. Looks like AlphaStar wants to attack. It's a somewhat scary army, but many of the decisions that AlphaStar has made so far this game has led it to this position where the creep spread is over halfway through the map. And that's hard. We've been talking about creep throughout, and Zerg moves faster on this, can see what's happening on it when it gets near creep tumors. It's very hard to engage Zerg on this. Speed bonuses are huge in StarCraft 2. So even though this is a very powerful army that we see from AlphaStar, it's going to be hard to make it all the way to a base. Let's look at all the ground that has to be covered. So AlphaStar is here. This is where the creep ends. You can kill the tumors and over time get the creep to recede. But the closest base is there. That's a pretty long distance that AlphaStar has to travel to get any real damage done to Serral. So there's the scan to take out these invisible creep tumors. Now, those are taken out, but it takes time for the creep to recede. So AlphaStar is very, very deep on creep right now. You can see at their supplies, they're both what we call maxed out. They're both up at 200 supply. Well, 199 of 200, same thing. And AlphaStar, being this deep in enemy territory, can be a little bit scary. A lot of Banelings morphing. Let's see how this fight goes. I'm going to slow it down just a little bit. Now, I should point out that during this, AlphaStar is multitasking. Looks like 12 Marines are getting ready to be dropped. That is very important to do. So AlphaStar sieges up, and Serral rolling in, gets some very strong connections there. A lot of biles coming down on those tanks. And then Serral retreats. Serral spent all of the expendable units. The Zerglings and Banelings all died, and now it's running back, or Serral is running back with his Ravagers, waiting for this next reinforcement of Banelings. But most of the siege tanks have been cleared, and the Marines by themselves are not really that threatening. Now, during all of this, of course, AlphaStar is getting some harassment done. So we have to try to take a look at both of these locations. Maybe we'll try to fall in AlphaStar for a second here. So you see the multi-pronged harassment going on. Way too many units at this point. So AlphaStar gives up this position at the bottom. Let me switch back to it. Gave up this position, lost those 2 additional siege tanks, picked up the rest of the Marines into the medevacs, and is flying them around looking for some more damage while controlling this group of Marines, which did end up killing a fair amount of drones in the main base of Serral. But this late into the game, 11 drones are not nearly as meaningful as they are early in the game. So right now, it's very hard for AlphaStar to find any additional damage here. dropping off a few Marines, trying to deal some damage, but of course the army is so close by. AlphaStar also getting out with this medevac. Looks like it wants to send it in to try to do some more. The one thing that AlphaStar is doing very well this game, though, is macroing. It's expanded well. It's continuing to add on production facilities to spend its money to get as many units out as possible. But there is a problem. AlphaStar has not changed its unit composition at all this game. This is a basic unit composition. It's siege tanks, it's Marines, it's medevacs. This is a very mid-game unit composition. And once you get into the late game, there are going to be units that start to counter these units in a very strong way. And we've already seen that Serral has a hive. This is the highest tech that Zerg can get to. So now that Serral is up in that hive tech, he can access all the different units as long as he makes the buildings for them. So for instance, right now, Vipers are being made. This is the most important thing that we will see from Serral in this game, these Vipers. They are a very powerful counter to the siege tanks. So AlphaStar in this position, it's making lots of units, it's expanding a lot, its army is very strong. When you look at these actual armies, when you look at the unit counts and the numbers, look at that, 8 medevacs, 6 siege tanks, 50 Marines or so right now. That will definitely kill the ground army of Serral. 50 Zerglings, 25 Banelings, 11 Roaches, 7 Ravagers. But with that additional tech, it's going to make it a bit harder. So AlphaStar still going around with a few of these units. Not able to get too much done. Leading out with some Marines. Looks like AlphaStar is trying to pick off a base here. Of course, AlphaStar ran across all of this creep, so Serral saw this coming from quite far away and was able to send up quite a few units. But good multitasking going on by AlphaStar as well. Sending units into multiple locations at once. But again, it's hard to attack onto this creep of Zerg, especially when Serral has so much right now. So this gets cleaned up. It's down here getting cleaned up. Looks like quite a few more drones have been killed. But again, we're later into the game. There's still 72 drones out. That's still a very solid economy. These Vipers starting to cast some of their spells, throwing down those parasitic bombs, dealing lots of damage to the medevacs, forcing AlphaStar to reconsider that harassment. AlphaStar continuing to build command centers, continuing to build siege tanks, continuing to build Marines, continuing to build medevacs, but not teching up anymore. Still on that very mid-game type of army. Whereas Serral is slowly but surely expanding the unit set that he can make. The Ultralisk Cavern coming up. The Ultralisk is basically a gigantic Zergling that is much, much stronger and much, much tougher. Very late game unit. So let's jump over to AlphaStar's camera again. There's 2 drops coming out. That's the one at the top. I'll slow this down a little bit so it's easier to watch. Expanding during this. That's a beautiful play from AlphaStar. Unloading its Marines off of the creep. Looks like it told its units to unload up at the main base, but those all got cleaned up very quickly. Now Serral, of course, seeing this because of the creep, is going to immediately jump upon it and kills off quite a few Marines there, forcing AlphaStar back once again. So AlphaStar is getting less and less done at this point. But it's continuing forward with its plans. It's expanding. It's making tanks, medevacs, and Marines. Alright, let's go to All Vision once again. So Serral coming in. Some very good cancels by AlphaStar. This attack that Serral is suddenly coming in with, I think Serral feels at this point like he's got a bit of an advantage and it's time to strike back for a moment after cleaning up both of those drops. Those were 2 command centers that were being made. So instead of letting them just die when they're still at very low health, AlphaStar cancels them and gets 3/4 of the money back. And Serral just going to very quickly, with these Zerglings and Banelings, kill off that planetary fortress. Very defensive building from Terran, but it cannot fly, so there was no real way for AlphaStar to save that. So Serral just kills a base and backs up, and he has enough money, as we can see up here, to replace that army very, very quickly. AlphaStar still just kind of running across creep, trying to get that damage done. More medevacs down here as well. Let's take a look. Hasn't really killed any additional drones on this harassment run. Yes, and some more of those parasitic bombs as well. Really dealing a lot of damage to these medevacs. So at this point, AlphaStar is not gaining any value with any of these harassment techniques. AlphaStar is actually losing value each time. Now Ultralisks are on the way. And AlphaStar looks like it has finally decided it is time for a full attack. Now this is where the tech is going to come into play really heavily for Serral. Because again, if you look at the actual armies, okay, so as far as economy goes, very similar economies. 77 SCVs, 79 drones. A lot of bases for AlphaStar, a lot of bases for Serral. 16 siege tanks. This army can't really do much against 16 siege tanks, with 35 Marines backing them up, with 5 medevacs healing the Marines. 46 Zerglings, 11 Roaches, 30 Banelings, and 7 Ravagers will get absolutely pummeled by the army that AlphaStar has. But again, Serral has gone up to the highest tier of units, and we don't see any units that we consider late game units from AlphaStar. While you'll use things like Marines, medevacs, and tanks throughout the game, eventually professional Terran players will mix in units like the Liberator, which is a great flying support unit, and the Ghost, which has some of the Terran spells, such as EMP to stop the spells of your opponent, or it has a sniping spell to kill off very valuable units like those Vipers. So AlphaStar just staying on this lower tech is going to make this difficult. All right, let's look at this position AlphaStar is taking right now. So there's a lot of kind of debris, I guess, terrain in the middle of the map that's going to make it hard for Serral to close on this army, which is very good for siege tanks. Siege tanks want nothing to get near them. They are one of the furthest shooting units in the game. So if you can siege up behind an area like this, it's very hard to attack in. AlphaStar stimming and running up, seeing if maybe it can deal some damage to this base. Of course, Serral is expanding here as well, so that might be a base that AlphaStar can take out. I'm going to slow this down a little bit. Now AlphaStar sieging up a massive siege here. Look at this. How many siege tanks is this? Oh my gosh. It's 13 siege tanks. Okay, so that's quite a few. They have +2 attack. This just, it looks brutal. This army would never do anything against it. Of course, Serral knows that. Some really heavy fire coming out. I do want to point out that during this, Serral has run in with a very nice counterpunch. Quite a few Banelings and Zerglings going after this, the 5th base of AlphaStar. And with the additional Banelings, we'll be able to kill that off, as well as a lot of the SCVs. You can see, look at that, 39 workers killed, down to 45 workers here for AlphaStar. So this was a very, very powerful moment from Serral. And one of the reasons that he's able to spend so many units to do this damage is because he did decide to tech up and go beyond this kind of tier 2 army. And we're going to see that come into play. I know I've been talking it up quite a bit. Okay, so watch this from Serral. Serral is coming in from the bottom. He's coming in with kind of a flanking maneuver with these Vipers. These Vipers have a spell called Blinding Cloud. It's going to make a green cloud, and wherever the green cloud is, it's going to reduce the range of the attack of the units underneath it to 1. So for instance, the siege tank right now, see this siege tank? These little triangles are where it can shoot to. That is very far range. It can shoot things that are very, very far away. You can see how AlphaStar has stifled these siege tanks back. So for instance, once Serral attacks, this siege tank will be hitting him. So Serral will think, well, it's one siege tank, I can keep going. But AlphaStar's Marines, which are very, very fast, will stim and run backwards. And then 4 more tanks will be attacking. And then even if Serral breaks through that, what's this? 4 more tanks and 4 more tanks will be attacking. So it's a very powerful set of units and a very powerful formation that AlphaStar has here that he can run back into. But as these Vipers come out, this engagement that would normally always go to AlphaStar with just a few well-placed blinding clouds. Look at that. These tanks no longer can attack. Now this tank can't, and now these tanks can't. So suddenly, Serral is running up and killing far more than he would have otherwise. Now the spell doesn't last forever, it does come off, but too late, already on top of this army, and every single siege tank taken out, most of those Marines taken out as well, and Serral left with units still from that attack. So this was basically the game-winning move for Serral here. Coming in with the flank of the Vipers, making it so the tanks couldn't do their thing, and AlphaStar getting punished for not ever going up the tech tree any further, for not adding to its unit composition anymore. So we can go up to a normal speed here. At this point, Serral just in kind of a dominating position. AlphaStar will continue to try what it was doing before, running onto creep. Some more of those parasitic bombs, trying to punish it. Unable to get any real damage done, losing pretty much everything. And you can see by the supplies up here, 123 of 200, 200 of 200. And again, higher tech units for Serral, more powerful units for Serral. These Ultralisks will be able to easily cleave through here. Of course, Serral doesn't want to overextend. It's always possible to lose a game of StarCraft 2 if you don't play right. AlphaStar being relentless with its counterattacking, though. Doesn't quite end up killing off that hive, but AlphaStar really doesn't have a lot left, to be honest. From here, maybe it's fitting to watch Serral finish AlphaStar off. This is the regular game speed. You can actually see that Serral switches screens a little bit quicker than AlphaStar normally. Serral jumping around, spending his money, making more units, and really dealing the final blow here. And that was that. With nothing left over. AlphaStar can't GG, but they eventually did turn it off at this point. And Serral was able to defeat AlphaStar's Terran.